Welcome to another Thursday night Bible study, brought to you as a ministry of SIGBC.
All right, so today we continue our Bible study in Living for a Faithful God. So we continue part 5 of Living for a Faithful God. We've been talking about the fact that Paul is encouraging people living in Thessalonica to do what they can to faithfully, from the heart, live for God because of his faithfulness to us. And to review very quickly, the first thing we observed was that living for God involved acknowledging the good in others and living in peace with each other. The second thing that we observed was that living for God involves always striving to do good for each other. And we talked about the fact that there is a way that God expects us to strive to do good for each other, by warning the troublemakers that is lazy and disruptive, by encouraging the disheartened, by helping the weak, and by being patient with everyone. And then the third aspect we looked at was living for God involves a spirit of continuous worship. And the idea of worship being not just our service for God, but also not just our going to church and praising God together corporately, but also always rejoicing, constantly praying, and being thankful in all circumstances, because this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. And the fourth thing that we looked at last week was living for God involves sanctification. That is, living a blameless life by holding on to that which is good and rejecting every kind of... Now, there we go. It looks like we're going to have some internet problems here once in a while, but bear with me. So, last week we looked at the idea that living for God involves sanctification, living a blameless life by holding on to that which is good and rejecting every kind of evil. And I mentioned that there were about 3 Greek words that we're going to be looking at as we continue this Bible study next week. And the first word is the concept of hold on to good. And there are, of course, 2 basic Greek words that are involved in holding on to and that which is good. The first word is katexo, which means to keep in memory, or to possess, retain, to seize upon, to take hold of, or to hold fast. And so the idea is to grip and don't let go of. Katexo. In other words, it's not necessarily the concept of being affixed to so much as making the effort to not release. We were traveling the last several weeks. Now we're in Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, traveled up from South Carolina, about 500 miles in one trip there. And we traveled from Japan to America and traveled to various churches. And wherever we go, we always have luggage. And so one of the things about luggage is it's heavy and you can drop it if you're not careful. Or you can grip tightly, bend your arms so that you don't stretch your elbows, and carry your luggage where it needs to be. But you gotta keep holding on, because if you release your grip, then it's a lot easier to trip, to fall, or to drop your luggage. We actually had one suitcase that we brought over here that once it arrived in South Carolina, the bottom was just shattered. And they gave us a new suitcase instead of it, so that was nice. But somebody dropped it. Somebody let go of that thing. And so the idea is hold on to, katesko, keep holding fast. Don't let go of. And the second word is kalos. The word kalos really is translated good, but it can also be literally good or morally good. In other words, valuable or virtuous, something that is better than other things, honest, worthy. These are all concepts involved in the word kalos. And so he's saying, hold on to that which is valuable. Hold on to that which is most important to you. Living for God involves sanctification, that is, living a blameless life by holding on to that which is good and rejecting evil. Which brings us to the second Greek concepts, which are reject evil. And the Greek word for to reject is apixomai, to hold oneself off, to refrain, to abstain. In other words, the idea of reject is to avoid that kind of concept. We have this basic, I think, understanding of this in recent history through COVID, because when COVID was a thing, then everybody tried to avoid those who might have COVID, and everybody even tried to avoid other people, because you never know if that person had COVID or not. And so you did what you could to hold oneself off or to abstain, to refrain from being a part of other people's diseases. And I think that's kind of the idea of to hold oneself off or to abstain, apixomai. And the second Greek word, evil, is poneros. And poneros directly means that which is hurtful. But in other words, it's used as evil or bad or grievous or harmful or lewd or malicious or even wickedness. And so poneros, the basis of the word is that which is hurtful to someone else or to yourself. So hold oneself off, abstain that which is hurtful to yourself or to others, evil. And of course, the third Greek word that we were looking at was that we are called to be blameless, amemptos. The word blameless is faultless, or I think a more easily understood aspect of this word is unblameable, or not subject to being censured, not subject to being corrected by someone else. And so here's the idea. Living for God involves sanctification. We mentioned last week that sanctification was something that took place at salvation, something that continuously takes place in our daily lives, and something that will take place fully when we reach heaven. But in living for God involving sanctification means living a blameless life by holding on to that which is good and rejecting every kind of evil. So what about blameless? What does that mean? Well, the word blameless, the Greek word is amemptos, and as I mentioned, when someone looks at you and is unable to find anything wrong with you, that's kind of the idea. We have some people who work in factories in our churches in Japan, and often it seems foreigners are hired for the task of quality inspection. And a quality inspection has to do with, picking up something, looking at it, making sure that there are aspects of it that are not damaged or excessive parts still attached to it, and then they will put it down. And they will put it down only if there is nothing wrong with it. And that's quality inspection. And so unblameable has the idea, amemptos, has the idea that when you inspect your life, or when someone else inspects your life, they can't find anything for which to accuse you of doing evil. Another way of expressing it is that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven, or when they accuse you of doing evil, they will be ashamed because there's no basis for it. And so the Bible is filled with concepts regarding simply doing things to the best of your ability so that you will live a life that is blameless, that is not subject to censure. Now, having said that, we've got to be careful to not expect perfection in others in this life. One of the opposite sides of this struggle is that it is something that we are called to hold ourselves to. It's not something we are called to hold other people to. So our sanctification is personal. We are to strive for our sanctification. We are to encourage sanctification in others, but we're not necessarily called to pick apart the lives of other people so that we can blame them when they do something wrong. No, it is holding ourselves to the standard of godliness. And so again, living for God simply involves sanctification. That is, living a blameless life by holding on to that which is good ourselves and rejecting every kind of evil ourselves. And if someone comes to us and asks us for help because they're struggling, we help them to do what they can as well. Our final contemplation, and we'll continue this again next week as well, but our final contemplation is number 5, living for God involves holy expressions of love for one another as members of the family of God. And we'll talk a little bit about the culture of expression of love, because every culture has a different kind of expression of affection and love one for another. For example, in Japan, there's a very standoffish. Greetings are not handshakes. Greetings are bowing, and there's no hugging, and there's no kissing. And in fact, public display of affection is highly frowned upon in Japan. Whereas if you go to Middle Eastern countries, they might kiss you on the lips as a greeting. And so there are a variety of different cultures when it comes to greeting one another. We'll talk about this next week as we contemplate our final aspect of living for a faithful God. Living for God involves holy expressions of love for one another as members of the family of God. All right.
Thank you for listening. You can also join us in person or live on Facebook every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. This has been a ministry of Sakahogi International Grace Baptist Church.